Hello, I am Stephen Jarrett, and this is Iku Akamoto. Today we will be demonstrating the in-range of motions at the following joints, and we will be describing the infills at these joints with the contribution of a goniometer. Okay, first thing we will measure is his glenohumeral joint. We'll measure the motions. We'll start off with glenohumeral flexion. So find the tip of his shoulder. Go ahead and go through the motion for me, Iku. Good. He has almost the full 180. I'd say the only restrictions that Iku has here is most likely the joint capsule itself with the humeral head moving in such a way, and then the musculature in the area as well. I can feel his lats are really tightened up here. Some deltoid, not much, and not much of pec major attaching on, but most likely definitely lats. From this position, I'll measure Iku's shoulder abduction. So go ahead and go out for me. Good. Good. Definitely I would say musculature here. I can feel this pec major starting to tighten up on me. Some lats as well. And I'd say a restriction here would also be his acromion process. His AC joint starting to knock with that humeral head to keep him from coming up any further. And then I'll have you bring your arm back to your trunk, please. Usually that's come out to about 0 degrees. If you're just doing adduction and not cross-body adduction. Limitation here is obviously his trunk. May I have you flip over for me, Iku? Now usually this is unorthodox. You will want to keep measuring the same side, or for range of motion you will want to do bilaterally in order to make a comparison, but my apologies, we have to switch arms for extension. Okay, go ahead and extension for me. Good. His body starts to roll with him as compensation, but you can definitely feel the deltoid is pretty tight here. Some of his scapular muscles are starting to tighten up to keep him from coming back, and definitely the front of his joint capsule is tightened up here to prevent. You're good, Iku? So we'll measure last motion. Can I have your foot back over for me, Iku? Sorry. Last thing we'll hit is internal and external rotation. So go ahead here for me. Go ahead, palm down for me. Good. It seems to be a little bit limited. I can feel his humeral head popping up into my hand. The anterior of that capsule is pretty tight. A little bit of pec tightness, not much, but definitely the joint and the musculature around the joint are tightened here. Come back to neutral for me. Good. Can I have you go palm back? Good. Almost the full 90 here. Definitely, once again, his humeral head and the anterior of his capsule is tightened up. Definitely pec major here. And his humeral head is popping up into the socket as well. Good, thank you. Next thing we'll measure is his radial ulnar joint. Here for me. Good. Can I have you flex for me? Good. The restriction obviously here will be the elbow joint itself, the olecranon. Try not to pop out the front of this thing. And also his bicep here and his tricep here are preventing the motions any further. Have you come back down for me. Iku has slightly extended elbows here, which go slightly below 0 degrees. But as far as limitations, I'd say the tricep itself, the bicep is on slack, but it will prevent you from pulling. And then also the olecranon process. Last thing we'll do, upper extremity wise, is hit his wrist. You may have your wrist on this chair for me. Thank you. First thing I'll measure is flexion. So can I have you wrist down for me? His extensors seem to tighten up instantly to prevent that from going any further. Actually, his flexors, I'm sorry, are tightened up to prevent him from going into an extension. His extensors are definitely tightened up right now to prevent it. And this is a very fluid joint, so I would say musculature is what's preventing the restrictions. Can I have you here for me? His flexors seem to obviously tighten up when he goes into flexion. Extensors you can feel are not on slack, they're definitely taut, so once again, I'd say musculature is restriction. Can I have you here for me? Can I have you palm down? You can see the musculature, everything when he starts to pronate, starts to tighten and pull to keep his arm from keep rotating. The joint itself seems to be pretty taut as well. Can I have you back here? Back over. Musculature here will prevent his hand from supinating any further and keep it from just keep rolling outward. And also, I would say the joint itself is intact. The ligaments are intact to keep them from also supinating any further. I think we're good here, my man. Now, next thing we'll move to his lower extremity. Okay. First thing I'll do is measure Iku's femoris acetabular joint. I will measure his flexion first. Find his greater trochanter, have his knee extended. Go ahead and hip flexion for me, Iku. Good, good. The infill here, I can definitely see that his knee cannot fully straighten, which would indicate a tight rectus femoris here. Iku, do you feel like it's harder for you to straighten your leg or to bring your leg up?
I feel tightness or rectus femoris.
Okay. I would definitely say a rectus muscle here is limited. The joint itself seems to be pretty fluid in motion, but the capsule does. I would say if I am feeling hip flexors, the rectus is definitely tight. Not much gluteal stretch here, but the hamstrings are definitely taut too to prevent any more hip flexion. Can you come back down for me? Next thing we'll look at is abduction of the hip. Yes. Can I have you bring your leg out for me? Good, good. Stop there. His body starts to come with him as compensation. Adductors are pretty taut here. And I would also say the humeral head, the way it's pointed down that capsule, the ligaments under are preventing it from going down any further with the adduction. Can I have you come back? Good. About 0 degrees, his trunk blocks any further motion. Next thing I'll do is internal external rotation. Have you point your toe towards the door. Good, good. Does it feel tight in your joint here, or is it muscle, you think?
Muscle.
Okay, well, the patient reports feeling like a muscular tightness rather than joint limitation. I'll take his word for it. Have you point your toe that way? Also muscular?
Yes.
Okay. Definitely tight around this capsule here. Okay. I think we nailed everything except for hip extension. May I have you flip over for me? Once again, my apologies. We have to switch which side we're dealing with. Can I have you go into hip extension for me here, Iku? Good, good. Very good hip extension here. Very nice little back smog here. Can you pop up into the motion again for me? Definitely gluteal tightness. Hamstrings are tight here. Quads are pretty much on slack, not too tight. Can't really get to his hip flexors from this position, but I guess you'd feel some type of tautness to prevent you further. Thank you, Hugh. So I'd say musculature prevents there. And last thing that we will check is the knee joint. May I have you, actually from that position, I'll measure your flexion. Can I have you bring your foot to your butt as much as you can? Good. Patient almost has the full 140 degrees here. Musculature, I would say, not the hamstrings or glute. Actually, glute's pretty tight here. I'm not sure why. Anyway, I'd say the joint capsule itself prevents that knee from bending any further than it is, but I don't really feel musculature limitations here. Possibly in the quads here in the front. And then can I have you put your leg back down? Appears to be a full 90 degrees of knee extension here. And then next thing we will do is passive, active assistive, and active range of motion for the following. Have you sit here for me? 79 minutes. Very cool. First thing we'll do is passive shoulder flexion. Make sure he's relaxed. Good, good. Next thing we'll do is active assistive, so go ahead. Get a little bit more out of that, and then just go ahead for me. Okay, pretty good active as well for shoulder flexion. Next thing we'll do is knee extension. First passively, just make sure he's relaxed. Good, some pulling from the hamstrings to prevent. Go ahead for me. Good, good. And then just go ahead. Full. Well, close to full. And then next thing and last thing we'll do is ankle dorsiflexion. I got you, my man. Feels very restricted even from 90, even from neutral. Go ahead. Even more with active assistive, and just go ahead. And I got more out of active than I did with passive. Last thing we'll do is a specific joint and identify any range of motion limitations. Which joint should we do?
Hip flexion with knee extension.
Hip flexion. Let's do it, man. Cool. Cool. Hip flexion with knee extension. Actually, let's do it without knee extension and just hip flexion. So your lower leg's just dangling.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead and go into hip flexion for me. No, just let this fall. Yeah. Go back down for me. Restart it. Go ahead. Okay. Obviously, we have a lot more hip flexion here with the knee on slack rather than with it extended. Do you feel like your joint is preventing you from getting any further, or the muscles are far as they can go?
Joint.
Okay, we report feeling joint tightness for this patient. One thing we can do is still work on the musculature, the hip flexors that are involved in this motion. Stretch those guys out, stretch out the glute to provide some more mobility here. And then for the joint, we can provide some traction, some stretchers, some mobs in order to restore motion here. Thank you for your time, Iku. Hope we did all right. See you guys.